Courage the Cowardly Dog, created by John L. Dilworth, released 1998 on Cartoon Network. This is a clip from a student film, The Dirty Bird. So I'm going to do what I personally think are the best and least good episodes of this show, starting with least good because they're very similar to um Employee a Million's video on Courage the Cowardly Dog's least good episode list. This is the worst episode of season one. Eustace gets a gross fungus on his foot, and the foot turns into parodies of gangster characters in movies. But it's like the same joke. It's just the little guys repeating what the big boss says. So yeah, this episode is not funny because it's mostly just the same joke over and over again. Just the little toes repeating what the big toe says. And it's just too weird and not scary. And it's a very forgettable episode, and that's why it's the worst of season one. Best episode of season one, Shadow of Courage. This episode is about the shadow of a rich guy becoming its own character and scaring Eustace and Muriel. This episode has a great scene where they use the shadow art style to do the most disturbing stuff to Muriel, and it's really good because it's disturbing but not too disturbing for PG television. So that's why it's the best episode of season one, because it is the most disturbing scenes of season one, but not shown in a overly disturbing way, but it's still scary. And this is also a very funny episode. So that's why it's the best episode of season one, because the first episode would be funny, scary, and have first episode of season two, 1,000 Years of Courage. This episode is about asteroid crashing into Earth, causing it to spin around the sun really fast, making the wheel go 1,000 times in the future in like an hour. Now everyone's a banana. Yeah, this is a really bizarre episode, and it's not scary or funny. So the bizarreness doesn't work in a way that would make sense. This is a bizarre, weird episode. And look at the bananas. Even their eyes look like they're on drugs. So yeah, this felt like a drug writer episode. Like the writers were on drugs were making this, and they tried to put jokes or be scary. And I guess the backgrounds are interesting, but the way the computer generated grass is kind of makes me sick. So that episode is a weird episode and it's forgettable, it's not scary or funny. So now I'm gonna go to the best episode of season two, Courage the Fly. I want to talk about this Asian punk character. He's just a character meant to cause chaos and make stuff happen with the plot. So he's not a very deep character. So I never thought to him as Asian. I just thought to him as a punk that I didn't really think about that much as I was in the show. Keep that in mind as we get to another episode. So yeah, this episode is about Courage being a fly. And the reason I chose this episode of Best Episode Season 2 is because it's the episode where Courage is in the most danger and is not thinking straight. Now that Courage has the same brain as a fly, he goes into light. And now that Eustace is trying to kill him when he's the same size as a fly, it makes it the most dangerous situation for Courage. This is the most threatening Eustace has ever been in the series. Also, the soldiers are hilarious to watch. They're great side characters. Also, seeing stuff in Courage perspective as a fly makes everything more scary and threatening. So we feel scared just like Courage more than any other episode. So the cinematics of this episode make it very scary, and Eustace is the most threatening in this episode, and it's a really funny episode, so that's why it's the best episode of season two. Worst episode of season three. So season three is the best season of Courage the Cowardly Dog, so it was really difficult to find an episode that I don't think is good. An episode I decided on was Cats Under the. This is episode that has the least of Cat's character in it that has cats in it. It's just not a good episode because we don't see him as intimidating because we see less of him in this episode than our cat episodes. This episode focuses more on the comedy of the soldiers than cats, which is entertaining, but is not really what I want out of a cats episode. So this episode is less good at using the cinematics and directing to scare you than other Cats episode, and Cats is less intimidating this episode than the other episodes. So I don't know why you would choose this episode out of all the other Cats episodes. So that's why it's the worst episode of season 3. Best episode of season 3, Snowman's Revenge. Michael Olson is great at voicing the snowman. He's intimidating and funny. So this episode is about the snowman turning the entire world cold. Michael Olson is very funny when he sings this song about making Muriel and Eustace frozen. Courage also solves the snowman's problem by closing the heat in the world to make the world all cold. I love the scene where Courage is closing the clouds. It's really nice looking and cinematic. And since this is a epic Sonic show, they can do something good for the villain that changes the entire world and it will be back to normal again. There's something really unique about this show and its episodes. That's why it's the best episode of season 3. Worst episode of season 4, Floating Tiger, Hidden Dog. Remember when I said that I just fought this character as a punk and not as Asian? Well, this episode decides to change that by taking us to his country. And I don't know if we should be making a culture look scary. That seems like a very weird premise for a episode. It might be unintentionally. This episode is not funny, and is not scary, and is not memorable, and it forces us to think of the Asian character as differently than we thought of him before, which changes the humor of that character for the worse, in my opinion. So that's why it's the worst episode of season 4. Best episode of season 4, Profile of Courage. This episode is about cardboard taking over Eustace and Miru's bodies and turning their bodies into cardboard. The reason this is the best episode of season 4 is because Eustace and Miria at first don't like being cardboard, but then they start to like it. And this artist character might be a metaphor for how John of the War sees himself as a misunderstood artist trying to see the world through his eyes, and he doesn't know if the way he sees the world through his eyes is the best or the worst. This is so through the way Eustace and Muriel live their lives at cardboard and how they grow to like it over time, but at first it takes a while getting used to, which is a good metaphor for this show. At first, it is just weird and it might scare you away, but as you keep watching it, you start to really like it and appreciate it, which is um, how Eustace and Muriel feel about being turned to cardboard. So that's, in my opinion, one of the best and worst episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog. These episodes I choose the best are not talked about as much as other episodes, but I truly believe that these are the best that the show has to offer. And the reason why the worst is similar to Employee Million's worst list is because he's one of my favorite cartoon reviewers on YouTube. Actually, I think he might be my favorite cartoon reviewer on YouTube. And there's so few bad episodes of this show that it's really hard to choose something different than another person's list. So basically, this show has 90 episodes that anyone could consider their favorite, and like 14 episodes that I think anybody would consider bad or forgettable. So overall, this is an amazing show, and it's a show that a lot of people can get into because there's like 90 episodes that I can imagine people seeing as their favorite episode of the series. So yeah, this is a great animation show, and I highly recommend it. You can watch it now on Tubi. Bye. It's scary, funny, and has interesting art style, and the way it does mixed media is amazing. So I would recommend this show. It's awesome. Bye. It's both scary and funny.